Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our final live presentation here today as part of Queensland Garden Expo. I hope you've enjoyed the last few days, some wonderful presentations, and we'll let people jump on. Now, we're going to be hearing from Peter Heaton, and those who go and visit Heaton's nursery stand at Queensland Garden Expo, it's always a destination to go and look at all those beautiful ferns and anthuriums. And we're just trying to get over a technical issue that's got Peter off there at the moment. So we're going to see if we can get him online shortly. But till then, come and feed in. If you've got any indoor plant gardening questions, pop them up in the chat. We can come back to those along the course of the afternoon as well. So indoor plants, obviously a big focus with a lot of people spending a lot more time indoors. It's the cooler seasons. Got another seaplane or something going over the top. Cooler season out and about, so a lot of people are spending a bit more time inside. And Peter was to give us some tips on our indoor plants and how to keep them looking good. So hopefully I can throw to him shortly. But till then, if you've got any particular indoor plant questions, be sure to put them into the chat section, and we can come back to those a little bit later. But it's got, I'll just double check that we don't have a missing, there we go. No, so I'll keep an eye out just in case there's something through there. But indoor plants, also tell us what you're growing. So obviously Heaton's famous for all those beautiful ferns and also the lovely anthuriums, those beautiful anthuriums. So you might have been growing those in the past, and or myriad of other indoor plants. There's so many collectible indoor plants you'll find these days. Garden centres struggle to keep up with the amount of plants that are walking out the door as people engage with improving their plant life balance and getting out in the garden. So, and I'll just see, here we go. This is backstage. I'll just fix this across because I think we've got a bad link. So we've got a statement from Gwen, love my anthuriums, and they are a beautiful plant. Now I'm just going to try and just copy a new link and send it to someone, just so that we can try and get Peter on here. So apologies whilst I multitask, because we'll be able to get Peter to the right room, because the codes that are involved with these live streams are quite complicated. It's like a Wi-Fi password when you first receive one. So I'll just try and send this through to Kristen. We'll please share that through 8, 9, 3, 9, 939. Oh, she just found another link anyway, so that's fine. Okay. Apologies for that whilst I was contemplating the myriad of different characters that make up the password to get onto these live feeds. And it's been good. We just actually had Sophie Thompson on earlier. She was talking all about mental health and well-being benefits and dealing with stress. And because obviously it's not only COVID, it's amazing how quickly that sort of covers your mind, but also the issues with bushfires as well through many parts of the country. So those types of issues are obviously rebuilding those gardens. And I know Sophie's been involved with a lot of the projects that help rehabilitating within South Australia as well. So that was a great presentation. If you missed it, make sure you jump back in, and you can find that online. I'll tell you the other presentations, just the live ones, which I've helped across with so far. We had Phil Dubman on Friday. He came and told us all about how you can be growing your own fresh seedlings from in punnets. So essentially taking little punnets like this and raising your own wonderful seedlings. So that was one of the first ones through there. We've had Costa taking us on a few tours around both a community garden and also into his own garden today. So a bit of a wander around, checking out his worm farm. I can see Peter's come online. But yeah, make sure you go check out all those other videos through there as well. And I'm just going to throw, hopefully, Peter through here. I can see some beautiful plants in the background there. So I'm hoping we've got Peter there as well somewhere. I need to lean over this way. There we go. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Matt.
welcome across. Thanks for coming and joining. I'm going to throw across to you. So I enjoy learning about how we can be looking after all of our beautiful indoor plants with Peter. I'll come back in and jump in with any questions as they come. Over to you, Peter.
All right, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Well, this is a bit different after 35 years of doing it in person. I'm now looking at an iPhone, which weren't even invented when we started the show. So welcome. The good thing is you guys get to see a bit of our nursery for a change instead of just looking at me and some plants. So this is one of our sheds we're in. There's about 20,000 ferns in this shed. If I can get the cameraman to sort of go to my left, this way, we can even walk a little bit with technology, maybe. I was going to duck out here, come around the corner. If we walk down here a bit, we can see we've got a heap of Anthuriums out from another shed, all ready for packing on Monday to go out to different stores. So if you wanted any of our stuff, you can go to the Bunnings stores or any of your local retailers and just ask for Heaton. So we'll go back in here, bring my tech-savvy assistant around. And now we'll talk about how to keep your pot plants alive. So the most common question we get asked is, how do you keep your ferns alive? So the poor little maidenhair fern gets a bit of a bad rap. Everyone says how to keep them alive. So keeping your maidenhairs alive, especially in a pot plant, is no different than any other pot plant. Just they're a bit more delicate. So their tolerances for especially water and light are more delicate than other pot plants. So those people that have a group of pot plants and they know to water those pot plants when the spats starts falling down to the ground, like my mother always did for about 40 years, that's not really how you water. So you need to get your watering right. Once you get your watering right, that'll solve most of your pot plant problems. So there's a lot of different things that affect the amount of water the poor plant needs in its pot. So one of the biggest things and the hardest thing for you guys to tell is the actual potting mix. So that can vary greatly, the type of potting mix in a plant. Whoops, get rid of that dead leaf. So we use a straight coir mix in our pots, which holds a lot of water. So if you look at that as a 2-litre jug, this will hold over a litre of water. So there's over a litre of water available to that plant. If this was a really cheap bark mix, it would hold about 10 or 20% water. So there'd only be like this much water available to that plant. So a cheap open draining mix would have to be watered 5 times more often to get the same amount of water to that plant. So just by having a different mix in there makes a massive difference to how often you have to water that plant. The poor little maidenhair, it's a bit more delicate. So if it doesn't get watered, it looks like it dies straight away. Actually, the foliage dies off. If that happens to you, just soak it and it'll probably come back again. So if your maidenhair's sitting in the middle of a house like this, pretend this is your living room and we're right in the middle, the TV's behind me, it's nice and dark here, that plant won't need much water because there's not much light, there's not much air movement. So we're going to move the camera again. So if this plant that was sitting in the middle of the lounge room, come on, tech savvy, roll. We're going to move. So if this plant's over here, beside the window in your lounge room, it'll get a lot of air movement. The air movement will cause evaporation and that'll dry the plant out. So that plant in that same potting mix as over there where I had it before will probably need watering 2 to 3 times more often. So while we're here, if this plant, say, is a really good place for a maidenhair is beside on your front entry table, beside your front door, So that plant's sitting there. The last couple of days it's been raining. You've had the door shut. It's been dark. That plant hasn't needed much water for 3 or 4 days. In a couple of days' time, it's going to stop raining. You're going to open the front door and the back door. There's going to be a great lot of wind going over the plant. That plant might dry out in a day and might need watering in a day. So it really depends on the environment and the size of the plant. It's really hard if you're at a nursery or a garden centre and you say, how often do I need to water my plant? That's a really hard question to answer. So one of the easy way is, can I get a saucer from behind those trolleys, please? Is to put your plant in a saucer. And I'm just getting a saucer grabbed for me because I wasn't prepared. We'll come back over here. Just throw it. See if we can. So if we put the plant in the saucer like that, we still water the plant from the top, but we only water when the saucer's dry. So when that plant was, I won't keep moving the camera around because that makes it a bit hard for everyone to see. So when that plant was over beside the front door, and that door sometimes was shut for days, sometimes it was open for days, it was very exposed to the outside weather, a bit like if it was out on a veranda or a patio and it's exposed to the weather a lot more. You can tell. So as soon as there's no water in here, the plant needs watering. One of the things people do normally is they drown maidenhairs. They think they need a lot of water, so they just keep watering and watering and watering, and eventually they drown. It takes about 3 months to drown maidenhair. Normally at this point, I'd say put up your hand if you keep maidenhairs alive for about 3 months. And usually there's a few people that admit that. So if any of your pot plants, doesn't matter what it is, your Anthurium, ferns, your hangers, any other type of fern, any of your pot plants, if you put them in a saucer and you only water the ones when the saucers are dry, you'll find for starters, you'll go through a lot less water. And you'll also get to see how the weather makes a big difference in when you need to water your pot plants. So that will solve, if you go down that track, that'll probably solve 90% of your problems with your plants. Any of your pot plants, not just your maidenhairs. When you're potting up, if you're potting, say, from that's a 4-inch or a 10 centimetre to a 17 centimetre or a 7-inch, I wouldn't go any more than that in one size. Even that to a 140 would probably be better. So don't go too big at once. So when you're potting up, fill the empty pot up to the bottom of this pot you're putting in it. So fill it up that much. Measure the amount of slow release fertiliser you need for that size pot and sprinkle half of it in at that point. Put your plant in. So your pot plant's in that size pot. You fill it up about halfway around the edges. Put the rest of the fertiliser in at that point. So you've got fertiliser at the bottom of this size pot. And then you got fertiliser about 3/4 of the way up, and then put your mix on the top at the end. And that way, all the fertiliser you need is around the root system of that plant that you want. Now, if in the past you've potted up and you may have not measured the fertiliser quite so accurately, and you've decided that, you know, if a teaspoon's good, surely a handful's a lot better. And you've just thrown a handful on top and you're looking at me in the camera going, what an idiot, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That's worked for me for the last 40 years. I'm going to keep doing it that way. The reason why it has worked for you, one is that you know what you're doing and you're used to handling your plants that way. And if it works for you, whatever you're doing is working, don't stop doing it. Only do things, only change if you want to try something new or if it's not working. So if it hasn't been working, this is what I'm suggesting to do. So two reasons why that could be working before is every time you water a plant, so you stand there with a hose and water it, all the water that comes out the bottom of that pot plant is taking excess fertiliser with it. So if you've been standing there watering with the hose and having a glass of wine at the same time, enjoying the wine, enjoying the scenery, the plant's probably getting a lot more water than it needs. If you've gone to this system of watering your plants on sources, all the water that goes through the top of the pot and out the bottom ends up in the saucer and then back into the plant again. So if you over fertilise that, it's a bit like if we have too much salt. If we added a heap of salt to our KFC and had that every meal, we'd very quickly have way too high salt levels in our body. So same thing happens to your pot plant. So if you're over fertilising and have now an enclosed system, so the water goes in the top, down, out the bottom, and then back in the pot again, there's nowhere for the excess fertiliser to go. So now we're saving basically all the fertiliser we're putting on there. So only put the recommended rates on. And the good thing about being in Australia is everything's regulated. Apparently that's a good thing. But one of those regulations say is the amount of fertiliser that product uses. So if you buy some fertiliser, it will say how much fertiliser, what rates to use. Please read that. If you start doing it that way, and you don't need to water the top of the ferns. They take up all their water from the roots. Most plants do. The only reason why you need to water the surface is to get rid of the dust and stuff. So just to make the plant look pretty. All these benches behind me are all watered from the bottom up. So there's no overhead, there's no sprinklers or anything here. So all the water comes from the bottom up in the plants. Does anyone know how long I've been talking for?
10, 15 minutes.
All right. Matt, you just butt in if I'm, getting off track or all my listeners have gone to sleep.
All is good. Everyone's still here. I was just going to comment on the post, but if anyone's got any questions, just throw them in, and we'll come back to them at the end. So yep. All is good.
Righto, no worries. So now that we've solved our watering problems, which has probably solved most of our problems, like I did before, if there's any dead foliage on anything, just break it off. So I picked out two good plants here. Let me find just at the back of my head there. See the haircut. So if you see, you won't be able to see, but there's a bit of dead foliage on this little fern here. Just break it off. And that helps tidy up. Not only does that help tidy up the plant and make the plant look better, it also stops a point of entry for fungus and diseases. If you find a couple of grubs on your plants, you don't need to spray your whole bush house or your plants. Just pick them off by hand. And if you do that regularly, you'll stay on top of things. And that saves you using chemicals. If you do get a bad outbreak of something and you need to spray, once again, all the chemicals have a registration for use on them, and it'll tell you what they can and can't kill. They also have rates. Please go by those rates that are on the chemicals. But if you are spraying any of your pot plants with whatever, spray 3 times in a 2-week period. Because say you're spraying for caterpillars, most of the insecticides will only kill the caterpillar. They're not going to kill the moth, and they're not going to kill the eggs. So you need to spray the caterpillars and then 2 weeks later, you'll need to spray the caterpillars again before they turn into moths because the eggs have hatched. And then 2 weeks later, you'll have to spray the next lot of eggs that are hatched from the last lot of moths. And that'll break the cycle because, let's face it, normally when you buy insecticides, you have enough to spray your place, the neighbour's place, and most of the suburb. So use it at the right rates, and do it when you need to do it, but do it 3 times when you do have to do it. So, but if you can keep your plants tidy, we're only watering as they need it. So we're not watering the foliage. We're not drowning the plants. We're keeping the plants healthy and strong. We've used a slow release fertiliser when we've repotted. A good healthy plant really stays strong like we do when we eat healthy, and saves us getting sick. So, like for instance, this shed has never been sprayed with fungicides. So because we keep the foliage dry. If we want to keep our plant in a nice decorative pot like this, we want to stop the roots from searching for food and water. So we've stopped them from searching for water. Eventually the slow release fertiliser that we put in is going to run out. So if we want to keep it in a pot and keep it looking healthy, we need to start liquid fertilising. So once again, any of the liquid fertilisers will have rates. Mostly the rate is so much per month for the growing season. In Queensland, our growing season is at least 9 months of the year. So if you just disregard the winter 3 months, for the other 9 months, you can fertilise every month. Now, instead of fertilising once a month, because we're watering only when the plants need it and the amount they need, we're saving a heap of water. We can actually just water with a watering container. So if the fertiliser rate said 1 teaspoonful per 9 litre watering container once a month through the growing season, which is a fairly standard liquid fertilising rate, we're only going to water about once a week. Now we're doing it this way. I'll just about guarantee it. It'll be about, if it's still got water in it after a week, your saucer's too big, just put a smaller saucer underneath. So each time we fill our watering container up to water, we'll just put 1/4 teaspoonful in. So we're actually growing our pot plants like your hydroponic lettuces that you buy in the supermarket. So each time you fill the watering container up, put 1/4 teaspoon in and water the plants that need it and not the ones that don't. So if there's still water in your saucer, they don't need watering. Only fill the ones up. Only water the ones that are dry. On the liquid fertilisers, you have chemical-based fertilisers like Thrive and Aquasol, and then you have the seaweed-based seaweed-based fertilisers like Seasol and things. So it's a good idea to use them combined. So 1 week use one type of fertiliser and the other week use the other type of fertiliser, because the seaweed-based ones are really good at making the chemical-based ones available to the plant. The chemical-based ones are a better fertiliser, as in to give food to the plant, but the seaweed, the natural-based ones, are better at making that available to the plant. So if you can do 1 week with one type and the other week with the other type, that works out brilliantly. Is there any questions there yet, Matt?
I do have some questions coming through, so let me just feed some of them up. I'll put them up on the screen, but I'll read them out for you. So we have first question that came through being, should I fertilise my greenhouse plants with slow release fertilisers now in winter? And it's a mixture of orchids, African violets, ferns, and bromeliads.
No, I wouldn't do that in winter, unless they haven't fertilised for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And by the way, the best I've heard is a pot plant that's 9 years old that's never been fertilised. So if they haven't had any food for 6 months, I'm suggesting that maybe they need something, but preferably not to fertilise it through winter.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Is it okay to repot a plant when it's flowering?
My answer to that is, if you're going to repot, if you've got the energy to repot. You know what I mean? If you've got the time and the energy to repot, do it, because the plant will probably like it. On that, if people often ask me how often should I repot. So when the roots hit the side of the pot, I don't know whether that's very clear. Realistically, it's time to repot. So when the roots hit the side of the pot, that's when you repot, because then the plant can keep growing. We aim to repot plants. This will scare a few people. 3 to 4 times a year we'll pot up. Yeah. So we actually repot, say, every 3 months. If people at least look at their plants objectively once a year to repot, and whether they actually repot or the plant sunk, and they might just top the plant up and add a bit of slow release fertiliser. They might just tidy it up. They might cut half the plant away and repot into the same plant and same pot. But if they can do that at least once a year, that's a good start.
Yeah, very good. Next question coming in. If a pot sits in a saucer of water, won't it rot? And I guess that's probably dependent on the species. So, yeah, do you want to handle that with
yes, it will. Yes, it will. And it'll also breed mozzies and algae. So the idea of having it sitting in the saucer is you only water when that saucer's dried out. So that saucer should only have water in it for 3 or 4 days. And then it's dry before you fill it up, before you water the plant again. So the plant's not actually sitting in water all the time.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that clarifies it a bit.
Yeah. We've got someone with perhaps a bit of a boast, but also one when you mentioned maidenhair. So Alexia, with the maidenhair grows prolifically in the ground, but always losing it in pots. And thank you for your advice. And she cuts them back and lets them come back. But plenty of maidenhair in the garden, but not so successful in pots. I got the next question coming in from Irene. Should I keep up the liquid fertiliser going right through the Queensland winter?
Only if she hasn't been liquid fertilising. If she has been, and the plants have been getting fed, I would stop through winter and just use normal water, and then start fertilising again once the weather starts warming up in spring. Okay.
Well, here's another one along the fertiliser stream, and this is regarding Debbie's got a worm farm. Can she use wormweed liquid on her plants?
She can. I personally wouldn't, because, and I'll go into this because that question normally gets asked. So, in a pot plant, it's an enclosed environment. So, when we're talking about watering with liquid fertilisers and an enclosed system, so the water goes in, out the bottom and back into the plant again, it's a very small pot plant. So you need to not think of your pot plant as a garden. Think of your pot plants as hydroponics. If worms are in your garden, it's fantastic. If worms get in your pot plants, it's terrible. So two reasons why I wouldn't. One is if you get worms through, and I know you're not supposed to get worms actually through from the worm juice, but if you get worms through, it will destroy your pot plant. It will destroy the potting mix in around the plant. The other reason is that because this is a very small, even this size is like 2 litres of potting mix. It's a very small area for anything to go wrong in. So the chemical fertilisers that we buy all have recommended rates. The worm juice, you don't know how much fertilising it's going to do. So you really don't know what rate you can put it on a pot plant. On a garden, fantastic. I'd use it every week on a garden, but I would never use it on a pot plant. But that's only me.
Yep, no, that's cool. And
that's the reasons why.
Yeah. Other questions, Cheryl. I was told that orchids should be only fertilised by spraying the foliage. Is this the best way?
Orchids
fertilised by the foliage.
I wouldn't have thought so. I don't know much about orchids, but I know orchids take their nutrients up through their roots. So I'm thinking that when they're liquid fertilising the foliage, it's actually running down the plant and getting taken up from the roots anyway. So, yeah. No.
Yep, and there's lots of different orchid foods out through there, being at liquids and the little granular ones as well. So I'm sure there's through there. So that's the questions so far. I'm just double checking if I've got any other question. But it was interesting with your comment before about the different mixes, and we were talking about potting mixes yesterday. But what works for one person might not work for the other, and it's sort of sometimes it can come down to your watering, like you mentioned, and other aspects like that.
It is. There's so many different potting mixes, and like I say, if you're happy with what you've got and it's working for you, don't change, because if you change, especially the potting mix, it's something that you can't see readily, which is why I like using a saucer, so you can actually see how much water is going through the plant and out the bottom. But if you're happy with the potting mix you're using, don't change it, because it'll change the amount of fertilising you need to do, the amount of watering you need to do, the way the plant grows and everything. But if you're not happy with the way your plants are growing, that would be one of the first things I would change. Yeah.
Well, hopefully everyone's got some great tips through there from Peter, and we might leave you there. It looks lovely in underneath that playhouse, looking after all those beautiful anthuriums. I'm surprised no one asked me about, when they can expect, their anthurium delivered, because they're looking sensational across on the trolleys and off to the side there. But you can be picking up all your plants you mentioned at your local garden centres and the like. So some beautiful plants making their way out the door.
Yep. Yeah, there'll be there was a semi-trailer load went out last week. We're hoping for the same this week.
You might quickly mention, so in terms of, we've had Sophie on earlier, and a lot of people turning to gardening for respite and that type of thing. What's it been like in the nursery? I know a lot of plants running out the door, but also supplying during, a slightly harder time for delivering as many plants as you might want to.
It's been interesting because the first few weeks, nearly the first month, we just about stopped altogether. And so all of April I was throwing plants out, and then everyone decided that actually seen they were stuck at home, they'd start gardening, and then they started buying plants. So it was a shame, because I threw a heap of plants out in April and I could have sold them all in May. But and the problem with plants is people think that you can just turn up and buy a plant. But for instance, these 10-inch anthuriums here in 25 centimetre pots, I ordered. They come from tissue culture, so they come out of Holland. I ordered the tissue culture, so the young plants for them, 4 years ago. So they're not a quick turnaround. So if we start selling a heap of plants in May, I can't suddenly end up with a lot more in June. So there is starting to be a bit of a shortage around, but there's the plants are just getting smaller. There's not really a shortage. So if you get a plant that's, a small plant like this in a pot, don't be worried about it, because that just means that you don't have to repot it in a hurry. So, if you get a young plant in a pot, it means you can keep it in that pot for 4 or 5 months without having to repot. So don't be shy about getting the small plants in a bigger pot, because if they've been freshly potted, it saves you a job very quickly. Because if you are buying a big plant in a small pot, I'll guarantee that it's just about run out of fertiliser and you'll need to repot it fairly quickly. So
needs to be shown some love. I've got the finished up. I've got and again another brand from Alexia. She bought her Anthurium, Princess Alexa. It's thriving, and she bought it at Queensland Garden Expo a few years ago from you. So good to. It must make you happy when you see or hear of plants that are doing so well out in people's homes and gardens.
It is good, and the new varieties of the Anthuriums that I suppose have been out for 10, 15 years now, compared to what you bought 25, 30 years ago, the new varieties, if they're happily growing and they're in the right light, they will flower. And they'll flower all year round. It's the only plant I know that will do that. So if they're happy and they've got the right light levels, they'll keep flowering. Once they start flowering, they don't stop. They flower all year round. So good on her for keeping it going, and I hope she gets some more.
Very good. And well, we might leave it there. Thank you very much for sharing us an insight into the nursery side of things as well, and great to be sharing those tips as well for how you can keep your plants alive and healthy and have success. So thank you very much for joining us, Peter.
No worries. Thanks for having me, and I hope everyone's a bit more confident about how to look after their pot plants, especially the poor little maiden there that gets a bad rap.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Peter. If anyone has any questions for there, you can keep following them. We'll try and keep on track of any other garden questions that pop up. But thank you to Peter. Thank you for everyone tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend on what would have been the Queensland Garden Expo, but virtually this year. But it's been fun joining in and chatting with all these experts over the weekend. So thank you very much.
Thank you.